tonight.
All right. So unfortunately, as you might have heard about a little while ago, Dick Butkus, one of the greatest defensive players and linebackers of all time, passed away.
Yeah.
I'd like to see the light of everything. So we can talk about how he was an amazing defensive player. We can talk about all of his accomplishments and how he was probably one of the most feared players of the day, first ballot Hall of Famer. However, I do want to also bring you attention to two things. Number one, if you ever see the Saturday morning show Hang Time, for 3 seasons, he was the coach of the basketball team, succeeding Reggie Theus for that spot.
Mhm.
And as a kid, that was literally probably one of the first times I remember Dick Butkus because I never actually saw him play. He was in the Hall of Fame in '79. So that's one thing. But number two is he had a Twitter account. And the following tweets are part of his Twitter/X account. I haven't posted for over a year, but I found some good ones. Number one, it's Groundhog Day, which means the New York Jets have already been eliminated from playoff contention. Also, I don't think I can switch between one of them, but I could also say somebody complained about his play on the field and how he hit his father, and then he tweeted, probably deserved it. So, Dick Butkus, pioneer on X/Twitter, and will be fairly missed. He is one of the standards of the defensive position in all of football history.
Yeah, I think our good buddy Nolan Toppin, who used to be our technical director back in the day, put it succinctly in the group chat before we came on the air. He was the monster of the Midway.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, who are we, by the way? Who are we? I'm Steve Rabinowitz.
I'm Jay Kaplan.
And I'm Anthony Strait, and to quote the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes. So, what do you want to talk about tonight? Because,
also, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Also, one great fact. He also said this great line. I actually just heard it from the Thursday Night Football broadcast that was being brought in. Some people were born to be doctors or meant to be doctors. I was meant to be a football player.
And more specifically, the man was meant to be a middle linebacker.
The man was meant to be a menace. All right. So, with all that being said, the middle doesn't describe NFL right here in New York. It's bad. Or the teams that were standing in the division series. It's good. By the way, originally this was going to be about Jimmy Butler's media day haircut from Monday, but obviously we do rewrites. So that's initially what I was going to show you guys, but that's what we did. So we're going to talk about everything. And this is a rare show that we're going to talk about the 4 major sports. So we'll talk about the hockey locals. We'll talk about the football locals. We'll even talk game time and other things. We can give that to you too. But first, baseball local edition. Aaron Boone is going to be back in the Bronx for his 6th season as Yankees manager. Meanwhile, in that same time period, the Mets are going on manager number 5 as Buck Showalter's 27-game drop from a 101 win 2022 to a 74 win 2023 was not enough to give him a 3rd season in Flushing. Now, here we go again. As the Met job search begins again. And Anthony, again, we will talk about the legacy of another fired Mets manager again. Give us the legacy of Buck Showalter in his what seems to be the normal net stay of 2 years in Flushing.
Yeah, you know what? It's like every 2 years I'm in this segment, giving a obituary on a Mets manager that's here today, gone tomorrow. But for Buck Showalter, it's a mixed bag. I mean, you think about this from the start of April 2022 to August, he was, without question, the best manager in baseball, and arguably had the best team in baseball. The Mets were kind of cruising along in the NL East. They had a 10.5 game lead at one point. Had some great moments, like the combined no-hitter, which is the second no-hitter in the history of the Mets franchise. Sent several players to the All-Star game. And just the team was rolling. And then you look at his tenure from September on to now, and it's like the polar 180. I mean, they lost the lead to the Braves, and obviously that series down in Atlanta where they got swept, losing the wild card series to San Diego. And then from there, you talk about and obviously you talk about the front office a little bit, the $300+ million payroll. And before the Mets even get through spring training, Edward Diaz go down a freak injury in the World Baseball Classic. He loses Justin Verlander, the newly acquired Verlander. Jose Quintana's not available. So really right at the gate, the Mets was behind the 8 ball a bit. Max Scherzer struggled. Specifically after he was thrown out of the game with the whole, the incident in Dodger Stadium with his glove and the substance on his hand. He was just never the same pitcher after that. And Jay, you're shaking your head. Remember, Garrett Cole had that same problem.
Yep, that's why I'm shaking my head.
Not long ago. And this Met team just completely fell apart in the month of June when they went 7-19. And the started pitching. That was supposed to be the strength of the team fell apart. The bullpen, some of his handling the bullpen was definitely under some fire when the Mets blew a couple of games during that month, particularly in Philadelphia, where they had a 4-run lead and completely squandered a game there. There were criticisms of how he handled the situations like players getting beamed off a lot of them last year. The Mets broke the record for hits batsmen in the season by a mile, and looked like they were on their way to build their own record this year. And there was criticisms, of course, local media, Buck Showalter not telling his players to retaliate or respond. But when you looked at the team as a whole, and I went to a couple of games late in the year, you never got the sense that the team quit or was not playing for Buck Showalter. Obviously, there was a story that Pete Alonso took the news of him being let go pretty hard, and that that he was clearly very much respected in the clubhouse. But when you have a situation where you have front office turnover, we just talked about this several months ago with the Phoenix Suns and new management and front office turnover there, that change is inevitable. And the guy that's coming in is going to want to bring in his own manager, his own people. And I think Buck Showalter was just a victim of collateral damage that happened this season. I mean, you clearly can't blame everything that went wrong with the Mets this season on him, but there were a couple of things that he could have done correctly as far as managing lineups, managing the bullpen. Sometimes it felt like he was managing to keep players fresh rather than win the game that night and worry about something else later. There was plenty of highs. The first 7 months of his coaching tenure, he won Manager of the Year. We all remember Francisco Lindor's post-game presser after Game 2 last year with his daughter, especially calling him Buck. So there was some great moments. Obviously, Buck Showalter didn't forget how to coach overnight. But the axe was gonna fall down on someone after a major disappointing season, and unfortunately, it was Buck Showalter. So, I mean, like I said, it's a mixed bag. Well, at least at first. But I'll let Jay pick up where I left off from there.
Well, Jay, I'm going to give you your the angle of David Stearns. He was named team president the day after Buck's goodbye. Mm-hmm. And current Milwaukee manager, who, as of this moment, is not currently managing. Mm-hmm. This team just got swept in the wild card round of the playoffs. So is Craig Counsell the head of the line to be the new man in Flushing?
I mean, Anthony, I gotta agree with you. I don't think I'm completely surprised by this with Buck. I mean, the Mets were finishing out a very disappointing season and about to officially announce Stearns as the new head of baseball operations. And as we know, and as you said, and most of the time the new boss wants to bring in his own guy to run the dugout. Now, would Buck have been retained if the Mets were going to be playing October baseball? Maybe, but they're not. So last Saturday night after the Mets swept the doubleheader, now former GM Billy Epler, former as of today, in fact, as he tendered his resignation earlier in the day, and we'll touch on that in a minute, walked into Showalter's office and gave him two options: resign or be let go. What's the point of doing it that way with basically one game left to play, especially when anyone who knows Buck knows he's not going to quit? I also take issue with Epler being the one to do it, and with Stearns using the excuse that until Monday, he was technically still under contract to the Brewers, so he couldn't actually talk to Showalter. Okay, fine. Then wait till the season is officially over, call Buck into your office, and then tell him the team is going in a different direction. According to league sources, Showalter was a little annoyed about the fact that he didn't even get a courtesy phone call from the new head of baseball operations. And if that's true, I don't blame him. It comes off as a bit of a chicken shit move by Stearns. I get it, because based on all reports, Stearns and Showalter's personalities probably would not have worked well together. As one source said, they have, quote, very, very different personalities. According to those who know or have worked with Stearns, tends to be pretty buttoned up. Now, he can be personable, but he's not going to reveal much in casual conversation. Showalter, on the other hand, can be, quote, chatty in a folksy way. And while he's known to protect his players from criticisms, apparently the way he goes about it may not be quite the way some baseball executives of Stearns' ilk would prefer. It'll be interesting to see, Rabbi, how Stearns goes about replacing Buck, especially since this will be the first managerial hire of his career, as he inherited the one he had in Milwaukee and decided to keep him, which worked out pretty well for the franchise. That manager, as you said, is Craig Counsell, went 90-72 this season in his 9th year at the helm of the Brew Crew, winning his 3rd NL Central Division title. Overall, Counsell's gone 707-625. It's a .531 winning percentage. 3 division titles, made the postseason 5 times, finished first or second in the division 6 times, hasn't finished under 500 in a full 162 season since his 2nd year back in 2016, and he's averaged a little under 91 wins per season in those last 6 full seasons, finishing 2nd in the National League Manager of the Year voting 3 times, with this year's vote not in yet. Now, as you alluded to, Counsell's contract is up after this season, which, as you also said, ended Wednesday night with the Brewers getting swept in the National League wildcard round by the Diamondbacks. And to date, the Brewers have not yet given him a new one, so he will be a free agent, which will lend itself to a lot of talk about whether he will be joining Stearns and Queens due to the pre-existing relationship and the success that Counsell had in Milwaukee. The Brewers had made the playoffs just 4 times in the franchise's history before he took over as manager. It would seem to be a no-brainer, right? As the prevailing opinion is, the Mets would be unlikely to hire a first-time manager, but Counsell has his roots and family in Wisconsin, so if the Brewers give him a contract respective of his worth, even if it's less than the type of money that owner Steve Cohen could throw at him, there is a school of thought that says it's unlikely that Counsell would leave his family in the city he calls home — he lives in Milwaukee year-round — to manage under the bright lights and intense media scrutiny of Major League Baseball's largest TV market. Now, all that being said, managers with resumes and track records of success like this are rarely available. So Cohen and Stearns would be remiss if they didn't at least try to persuade Counsell to change his address to Citi Field. I don't know. We'll see.
I think it's kind of a no-brainer in my book, and I think just considering the fact that the two just have similar mindsets, and what you mentioned to me before, having somebody, how Stearns wants to hire somebody who has his intentions and his thoughts in mind, that's going to be the first and foremost move. Now, earlier today, the plot thickened a little bit, so I'm going to throw this at you with Billy Epler resigning, initially saying that he was going to let the new regime come in, but after further,
as I said, reeked of something.
And it did, because apparently him and Stearns had already talked and said, you're going to keep your office, I'll be in a little office next to you.
And then
it turned out that in what is probably considered a 5 on a scale of Met scandals of people who are resigning, this is a 5, by the way, Anthony.
Former Mets GMs resigning from that standpoint alone.
Yeah, still a 5. But improper use of the injury list. Nobody has known any more details. Guys, that's a little bit of a shock. And does that change anything that Stearns wants to do? Or is this actually make it a little bit better for Stearns to actually have a new course?
Honestly, I look at Anthony. I agree with you. I don't know that, because here's the thing. Stearns had no problem keeping Epler on board. It didn't seem like he was going to immediately make wholesale changes. And he and Epler know each other from being, running in the same circles and doing the same job. But to me, it's a little weird that, considering the other things that have happened that have forced Met GMs to resign during the tenure of Steve Cohen as owner, I find it a little weird that Epler would tender his resignation over something that at worst is going to cost the Mets some draft picks. I mean, to me, it's not something that's egregious unless there was something there where Epler got a sense that with this coming to light, Stearns was going to give him the same option that Epler gave Buck, resign or I'm going to fire you because I don't want this black mark on my resume, barely not even a week into my tenure here. So Epler falling on his sword under those conditions, I guess, makes some sense. But I don't know that it changes what Stearns was going to do in one way or another. I don't know that it makes it easier or harder in any shape, manner, or form. It just means that he has one less, resource at his disposal to, kind of get. But you got to figure he kind of already came in. He had to have come in with a plan. It's kind of been the worst kept secret in Major League Baseball that he was going to take this job the minute he was no longer officially under contract to the Brewers. So, he's been studying the Mets for most of this season and kind of getting a sense of who they are, where they need to go. He's been talking to people, so he's had conversations. I don't know that this changes anything for him. It just, it's just another example of, Mets are going to Met, right, Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, you think about it like this. It's not exactly a DUI or anything like that.
Right.
That would have caused a firing. But look at when you think about Stone, I mean, it just basically give him a clean slate. I mean, that's pretty much what he is coming into. And, I mean, he can bring in his own manager, and now he gets to bring in the whole GM, which is ironic because the Mets have gone almost 2 years without a team president. We finally get one, and now we don't have a general manager to go with that. So it is. And, oh, by the way, and the cherry on top is Pete Alonso hired Scott Boras to be his new agent.
Yeah, that broke today too.
Yeah, and he's going to the final year of his deal. So this
is
clearly
those contract extension talks are going to be fun.
What could go wrong? Yeah, this is literally being a New York Mets fan, and I tweeted you before. I texted you before the game. I was like, Yankee fans complain about Brian Cashman. Are you serious?
Right. You're kind of right. Okay, let's not get into a Yankee rant here because I feel like everything in Jay's convention.
I praise the Yankees.
I got Rabbi restraint is being to be exercised. We're going to save that rant for the the official post-mortem of both teams from this season. We'll save it for that.
Okay, quickly so we can get back on track a little bit here. I want to talk about other managerial candidates. I don't like the fact that you need to have someone with experience because the only two guys right now available on the free agent market, because Bob Melvin is going to stay with the Padres in 2024, that would have been a pretty good pick, is Gabe Kapler. I'm not a big fan of Gabe Kapler.
No.
I don't like his style. I don't like his way with the media.
No.
And I don't think he is just a good manager. He doesn't work with his team the right way. And he didn't do any good things with the Giants after they had that surprising season in 2021. So his name is going to be out there because if you want a manager with experience, there's only two really available on the market right now. But go ahead, and then I want to finish, but make it quick.
Yeah, I would say this though, with Gabe Kaplan, basically, what Yankee fans complain about with Joe Girardi, you would get with Kaplan too. He's very much hard nosed. He managed every game like it was Game 7, and honestly, he did not do a good job handling the media in San Francisco. I mean, and there was a couple of instances with the players that Yeah, that
No,
he
and,
had
and I'll
in
tell
the
you this.
clubhouse.
I'll tell you this, Rabbi, and then I'll let you have it. I read a quote from Stearns' his press conference this week about what he's looking for in a manager, and one of the big things that he cited was ability to, communicate and develop relationships both with the players and the media, being the face of the franchise. If those are two of the things that are on his checkbox, I'm sorry, Gabe Kapler is 0 for 2 on both of those.
And I think that's almost a sign to me as saying that the person that he trusts the most with it is counsel. But if he wants to go another way, or if he has to go another way, 3 names that are out there: Joe Estrada. All right, Espada.
Yeah.
Was the bench coach, is currently the bench coach under Dusty Baker. Is going to probably be Baker's successor, but if he doesn't want to wait, that's a spot where he can go. Equipped to do stuff in Houston, but who knows when Dusty will ever retire. Don Kelly.
Don Kelly.
I'm getting terribly on this. 8 seasons in the major leagues, made his debut at 27. Scout for the Tigers in 17 and 18. He was interviewed for the Mets position the last time around. He is also with the he was also with the Astros in 2019 Pirates. Good choice. Clayton McCullough is another team Steve Cohen has always admired the Dodgers blueprint. Yep. Dodgers first base coach last 3 seasons. He also interviewed for the Mets job in 2022. And a bonus, I've got some GM candidates in here that may be okay with working under Stearns. James Click was the Astros manager just this for the World Series term. He could have been the White Sox general manager, didn't get that. That's something that is interesting. Currently working with the Blue Jays, obviously. They're done too. Randy Flores, who was a former pitcher with the Cardinals. He's still with the Cardinals. Has done a bunch of good drafts with them. Carlos Rodriguez with the Rays, and Ben Sistanovich with the Braves, who is kind of a nerd. They both attended Harvard, pitched for the Prince in 2008 to 2011. So, but again, you're having a GM who's going to work a clean slate, and is going to be Stearns' guy. So it's going to be very interesting to see.
Rabbi, this isn't a manager candidate you threw out there, but obviously his name's going to get bandied about because of the New York connection, and that's Don Mattingly. And I was wondering what both of y'all would think about that.
I don't think he would be good for the Mets. That's for sure. I know. I just don't think he has the temperament to stay around as Mets manager, and I think he needs to be in a smaller market, I think, than this.
Maybe.
Yeah, but I think with Don Malley, I think his temperament as a player, and he was pretty more. I wouldn't say distant, but I think he really didn't want to take himself too much to the New York media and being manager and being front and center. That's pretty much all you're doing during games.
I think
I can't really.
I don't necessarily disagree with you guys because he's
counsel.
He's Donnie Baseball has seemed more comfortable now that he's not a manager.
Counsel's probably the perfect middle experience, and in that 50 to 55 range, which I think.
I definitely think he checks all of his boxes. But the question will be is whether or not he wants to be here in New York, because he's going to be mentioned in, for every potential managerial opportunity. And, this is a guy who is who is Wisconsin through and through, Milwaukee through and through. And it's a question of whether or not he'd want to be under the type of scrutiny that he would be under here.
Well, I think it's a question of Milwaukee or New York, honestly, because I don't think there's any job right now that's more shining than New York. But we'll see what goes on. All right, gotta move on to the American League and National League Division Series. By the way, this is the one that stayed the same. The Mets angle was the one that got changed by current events. What is that? Okay. The American League and National League Division Series, the only playoff series in a major sport that still thinks, sure, 5 games can tell us who's best in the series. Yeah, that's the ticket. We're going to look at all 4 series and give you a pitcher and hitter to watch for each team. We're going to jump around leagues here. So, Anthony, let's start with what I think is the most intriguing series, and the only series that's actually ever happened before in the playoffs, and that's an NLDS rematch between the last 2 pennant winners of the NL, the Braves and the Phillies. The Phillies pretty much stopped the Braves back-to-back World Series push in 4 games last year right out of the gate, finishing with the ultimate Game 4 embarrassment, an inside the park home run for a catcher.
And yes, Anthony, the reason you got this series is because you're a Mets fan.
Yeah, I
and the Rabbi and I just, we had to.
Anthony had said it before.
Guys, it's a Met fan. Who knows these teams better than you do? Come on.
Anthony said it before. Watching the Marlins and Phillies with the winner to face the Braves is like his own Met torture of hell. Anthony, let's get a pitcher and let's bash a hitter from each team to watch.
Well, I gotta start with the Atlanta Braves. First off, you're the Braves. You win 104 games. You gotta be thinking to yourself, are you kidding me? We get the Phillies of all teams again? You gotta be joking. But obviously, when you talk to Atlanta Braves, you gotta go with Ronald Acuna Jr. And he is having a season to remember.
Ages.
You think about this 2 years ago when the Atlanta Braves won the World Series. He was injured. He had the season-ending knee injury. He was not the same last season, even though he was working his way back. By the way, you mentioned that inside the park home run. Acuna is the guy who did not back up that play and allowed the inside the park to happen. So that is one connection to that. But Acuna Jr. is coming off a season we hit over 300, 41 home runs, over 100 RBIs, 71 stolen bases, 40-70. The only player in the history of Major League Baseball to be in that club by himself. And he is the leadoff man to a team that leads the league, led the league in home runs, led the league in first inning runs, by the way. So if you're the Phillies, almost immediately, if you get a 3-up-3-out inning in the first inning of any of these games, it's a victory under your belt from the start.
Yep.
And then when you look at the pitching, and this is kind of an interesting thing, Spencer Strider is a guy I thought was one of the catalysts last season and helping the Atlanta Braves make that stunning turnaround and eventually catching the Mets and winning the National League Eastern Division for the second straight season. I mean, for this season, he's a 20-game winner. 20-5 record with ERA just under 4 and 32 starts. Did have a bit of a slide towards the end of the season, but he's been a gamer all year long. 281 strikeouts, broke the franchise record for strikeouts in the season. John Smoltz held that mark in 1996 and 253 to those innings. That took him to get that record. And obviously 96 the Braves went to the World Series. But then when you look at Spencer Strider, and I'm assuming he's going to get the game 1 start, he is going to the pressure is going to be on him to get the Braves at least one of the 2 games in Atlanta. We just set up the question marks behind the Braves starting pitcher. Max Fried may be afraidable in this series. Charlie Morton is not. He is out for the division series. But that puts more pressure on Spencer Strider to give them a quality start and to be able to shut down an equally potent Philadelphia Phillies team as the Miami Marlins found out that they've learned how to beat you in different ways. They don't have to hit the long ball, as we saw in game 1 of that series, as opposed to game 2. Well, they did rely on the long ball a little bit. And speaking of the aforementioned Philadelphia Phillies, there's a tale of 2 seasons when you talk about Trea Turner. And we remember the Trea Turner who went MASH in the World Baseball Classic, but it seemed like anytime he was at the plate, a home run was waiting to happen. And then there was the beginning of the season when he struggled in the first few months, hit 235, and a Philadelphia sports radio host basically called for the fans to show some brotherly love and cheer Trea Turner after he came off a road trip where the Phillies struggled, and one of his misplays cost him a game. That standing ovation may have been the moment that turned around his season, because from that point on, he hit over 300, 16 home runs, and 42 RBIs. And this after August 3rd, which was the game that took place in the the wild card series. He was 2 for 3 in game 1. Got on base a couple of times. Scored a couple of rounds. Was just as important. Got just as much of a factor in game 2 of that series. Again in the 2 games 2 against Miami. So Trey Turner, when you think about him being number 2 behind Kyle Schwarber being number 1, and giving the Phillies that 1-2 punch that they had envisioned when they gave him that big $300 million contract last offseason, now it's the time you've seen it come to fruition. And now it makes that Philly lineup so much more dangerous because it's like, okay, do you give up the home run guy? Give up the home run right out of the gate? Or do you allow a guy to get on base who could basically steal second and third in the same at bat? So that opens up the offense, and then of course you have the other dangerous Bryce Harper, who has improved dramatically as a first baseman. In his time with the Phillies, compared to him being a liability with the Nationals, whether it was first base or even in the outfield for that matter. The pitcher, you got to go with Zach Wheeler, and 13-6 winner. But when the Phillies have been at their best, whether it's been this season or particularly last postseason, he has been the catalyst, the transcender, and giving them that quality start to get them out of the gate. Think about game 1 last year in St. Louis. He gave them 6 quality innings, and the Phillies were able to scratch and claw their way to a victory there. You think about the series against Atlanta, he gave another quality start. And that division series was very key. In the LCS against San Diego, and again give him another solid start in the World Series against Houston. He's always just seemed to be the guy at the center of everything. When you consider this could be Aaron Nola's last postseason as a member of the Philadelphia Phillies, he is a free agent in the offseason. Zach Wheeler, and yes, he is a former Met. I have to throw that out there. It is torture for us Met fans. But Zach Wheeler has been everything the Mets wanted him to be. He's been everything the Phillies had expected him to be. He has been the guy. He has been the kind of just setting the pace for the rest of the Phillies. And by the way, if the Phillies do have an advantage in this series, it could be the bullpens. I mean, they got guys who just come in and just go high heat. And that is something that if the series comes down to it, it could be the one advantage that the Phillies may have. I can't really pick a winner in this series, but I do expect it to go the full 5 games. I do think these 2 teams are just too good for it to be a short 3 or 4 game series. I mean, little would have to happen for one of these 2 teams fail, as we did see Atlanta fall apart last year. For that series to end in such an abrupt ending. But I think this series do go to full 5 games.
I think one thing that I'm really interested, because I think the Braves were built to have a big season, but the Phillies are built for the postseason, and we kind of saw that last year. But if the name of the game is to hit home runs, this series is going to be a home run derby. It's going to be the 1960s version of home run derby, when it's just like 2 players that go for the wall.
Yeah, the slogan for this series is going to be "Let's Bash." Yeah. Like pretty much.
You know, you guys talk about. I mean, the things that the Braves offense has done this year are, historical proportions. I mean, they're putting up the kind of numbers that has people talking about them in the same breath as the 27 Murderers Row Yankees. But the interesting thing to me is the Phillies. Their mindset after losing the World Series last year, it wasn't just to have a good season. It wasn't just to simply make it back to the playoffs. No, their goal from day 1 of camp was to get back to the World Series. It didn't matter how, that was the goal. So are these guys playing with a chip on their shoulder? Yeah, they pretty much are. And they've been on a mission since the last out of last year's World Series. So this is going to be a very interesting series for both teams. And I have a feeling it's going to come down to somebody that we haven't even thought about yet. But
by the way, now that I think about it, it's going to probably be a 1-0 game 1. What am I talking about? All right, Jay.
Wait, hey, Rabbi, what does our pal Jason Stark say? Because Baseball.
Baseball.
All right, Jay. Who are we looking for on the other side of the AL's top seed? I'm reading this right. It says the Baltimore Orioles, the 100-win Baltimore Orioles, 101 win Baltimore Orioles, taking on the 5 seed, but the team who tracked as one of the best of 2023 in the Texas Rangers, as the 2 beat of the playoffs for the first time. Name your favorite Rangers Orioles moment. I only have the 30-3 game back in like 2012.
There's not a lot of them that spring to mind. And before I get into that, I just personally want to say, condolences to all of Charm City and, all Orioles fans on the passing of the late, great Brooks Robinson. He was a personal hero of mine. When I was a young kid, I played third base and I patterned my game after the human vacuum cleaner. Brooks, you will be missed. For the pitcher, I think for me, it's Yennier Cano, and for the hitter, it's Gunnar Henderson. And, the biggest agony of defeat moment for the Orioles in a season full of thrill of victory moments was on August 25th when they lost their closer, Felix Bautista, in a 5-4 win over the Rockies. Bautista left the game with some discomfort in his right elbow, was placed on the 15-day IL a day later. And then not long after that, the team announced he would be having Tommy John surgery and would be lost for the remainder of the season. Bautista had put up a dominant season to that point, 33 saves, a 1.48 ERA, 0.92 whip, and 110 Ks in 61 innings over 56 appearances. That is a huge hole in the 9th inning for a contending team. To a certain extent, manager Brandon Hyde has done it by committee, and the Pens ERA is pretty much the same pre and post Bautista injury, 355 before, 354 after. But when you have an all-star in Cano, you're going to give him first crack, even though Hyde will sometimes still just deploy him in the 7th or 8th inning in order to get through a tough part of the order. Now, Cano took over as the closer nominally. It was 0-2 with a 4.63 ERA, a 3.77 fielding independent pitching, 4 saves in 5 opportunities. And he's been a little bit more hittable in the second half, especially in the final month of the regular season. And there has been some concern that he might be a little worn down after throwing a career-high 72 innings. He'd never even come remotely close to that in any season in the majors or the minors. Prior to that, in his role as the primary setup man, he'd gone 1-2, 4 saves in 9 opportunities, but he had 28 holes. And he had a 1.62 ERA and a 2.67 fielding independent pitching. Overall, as a 29-year-old rookie, 2.11 ERA and a team-high 72 appearances. Now, he was especially tough on righties, held him to a slash line of 203, 244, 313. Ranked second, and he ranks second on the Orioles behind Bautista with those 8 saves. Now, the Orioles used their bullpen to cover 39.6% of innings pitched during the regular season. And I won't be surprised if they stick with their recent trend of increased bullpen usage in the postseason, utilizing matchups in certain situations, doing their best to not have their starters, who are actually pretty good, face a lineup for the 3rd time. As much as Hyde has options like, Danny Colombe, 281 ERA over 61 appearances, and Cionel Perez, who struggled early in the year, but he found his stuff not long after the All-Star break, en route to a 1.37 ERA and 27 appearances from July 27 through the end of the season. Either one option in the 9th inning, but a lot of that high leverage 9th inning work is going to fall on Cano, and they'll need the lights out version of him from before Bautista got hurt to give them their best chance to get to the ALCS. Now, as far as Henderson, look, we all know what catcher Adley Rutschman has meant to the Orioles since his arrival last season. The team has gone a record 91 consecutive series without being swept since he came up. But the player that'll be in the spotlight is the presumptive AL Rookie of the Year, and that's the shortstop third baseman, Gunnar Henderson. The 22-year-old put up a slash line of 255, 325, 489, 814 OPS, 100 runs scored, 28 homers, 82 RBI. His runs scored, slugging, and OPS led the team. His 28 homers tied for the team lead with outfielder Anthony Santander, and his RBIs were second behind Santander's 95. His 6.3 baseball reference wins above replacement, 5th overall in the AL, 3rd among position players. Henderson did struggle against the Rangers in the regular season. He was just 2 of 15, struck out 7 times. One of his 2 hits was a solo home run, but his 133 average, 133 on base were his worst marks against any American League team. His 333 slugging percentage, 5th worst against AL opponents. His 467 OPS, 2nd worst. Those struggles against the Rangers aside, not that I'm dismissing them. Henderson is a 5-tool player who can hit, slug, run, and field at 2 different positions, mind you. And like Rutschman, seems to be a generational talent. Nothing that's happened this season has seemed too big for him. And it's why he's been such a big part of the terrific story that has been the 2023 season for the Baltimore Orioles. The team was 94-56 in the games Henderson played. That's a slightly better winning percentage than they had for the entire season, 626 versus 623. And in those 94 wins, Henderson had a 298, 367, 591 slash line, OPS of 958, a batting average on balls put in play of 332, 24 of his 28 homers, 72 of his 82 RBI, 82 of his 100 runs scored. If the O's get that kind of performance from Henderson under the crucible of the American League Division Series, then this magical season for the denizens of Camden Yards just might continue. However, the team they're going up against, talk about knowing how to mash, these guys do. The pitcher I'm looking at for the Rangers is Jordan Montgomery. The hitter is Corey Seager. Now, both of these guys may be Captain Obvious picks, but Montgomery flat out has been the Rangers' best pitcher since coming over from the Cardinals at the trade deadline. He was 4-2 in Texas Blue in 11 starts with a 2.79 ERA, a 3.27 fielding independent pitching, and a 1.094 WHIP. Overall, he was 10-11 with a 3.20 ERA, a 3.56 fielding independent pitching, and a 1.193 WHIP. And that's playing most of that for a Cardinals team that wasn't really good this year. And thus, the onus is going to be on him to carry the rotation with both Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer both unavailable for the postseason due to injury. Nathan Eovaldi, who granted pitched really well in game 2, but came into the postseason with some velocity-related effectiveness issues. And then there's the guy who's the presumptive game 1 starter in this division series, Dane Dunning, who struggled to a 4.77 second half ERA after posting a 2.84 first half ERA. The bullpen, well, it kind of resembles a dumpster fire that had gasoline thrown on it. They went 30 for 6 opportunities. The Major League Baseball low 47.6 success rate, which does not bode well when going against the Orioles team that was tied with the Reds for most comeback wins in Major League Baseball this season with 48. Montgomery threw 7 innings of 6-hit shutout ball in the 4-0 game 1 win over the Rays, striking out 5, walking none on just 93 pitches. That's ace level outing, and the Rangers will need a similar performance from him in the ALDS against the 101-win AL East champion Orioles, a team he did not face upon his return to the junior circuit, where he's likely to be the game 2 starter. Seager, well, he's going to get some down. The Rangers shortstop is going to get some down ballot AL MVP votes after putting up one of the greatest offensive seasons ever for a shortstop. His slash line, 327, 390, 623, 33 homers, 96 RBI, a 1.013 OPS. All were top 5, other than the RBI, which were top 10. And in the AL, and our career best numbers in any season where he had at least 400 plate appearances. Seager scored 88 runs and led the American League in doubles with 42. He was the alpha bat in a Rangers lineup that had great seasons from second baseman Marcus Semien and right fielder Adolis Garcia, who continued his hot hitting in the wild card round. And the team finished first in the American League in runs scored with 881. That's 5.43 per game. Tied for the American League home run lead with the Twins with 233. Led the American League in all 3 slash line categories. 263 batting average, 337 on base, 452 slugging, and OPS 789. Seager went 2 for 4 with a run scored and an RBI in the game 1 win and duplicated that performance in the 7-1 game 2 win that swept the Rays out of the postseason, continuing his season-long demolition of right-handed pitching. Only Shohei Ohtani's 1.132 OPS against righties was better than Seager's 1.075. The Rangers will need Seager to hit like this in the ALDS as opposed to his regular season numbers against the Orioles, where his slash line was only 160, 192, 320 with an OPS of just 512. Only 1 homer, 5 RBIs, and only 2 runs scored. His 167 batting average on balls in play against Baltimore was his worst against all AL opponents, as were his batting average on base and OPS. His slugging was his second worst against AL opponents. Numbers like that by their best hitter will not cut it if the Rangers are to have a chance to get to the ALCS.
What a weird AL playoffs it's going to be. There doesn't seem to be a lot of usual suspects. And speaking of that, two other opponents who have no postseason history at all. The second seed and defending World Series champion Houston Astros, boo, and the third seed and the, as Anthony said, the team who won the race that no one actually wanted to win, but actually had a very good September and followed up with their first two wins in the playoffs in almost 2 decades. That would be the AL Central champion Minnesota Twins. So for the Astros, I'm looking at your.
You don't have to play the Yankees in the postseason.
There we go.
But this team looked a lot more fresh, although it was the Astros that did knock them out in the strike-shortened season of 2020, if you recall. But Yordan Alvarez had a very good September. And this team, the Astros, they're not going to win with their pitching, which we'll talk about in just a second. They're going to win because, again, as Anthony said, they bashed. And they bashed very, very hard. They needed a late season run from Alvarez. He was the AL Player of the Month for September. 629 slugging percentage, 441 on base percentage, 8 homers, and that was all top 5 for the month. For Alvarez, he needed this run because they were fighting every single day to get that AL West championship, and they got it on the last day. Had a bad postseason last year, had a great postseason in 2021. They're going to need Yordan big time if they're going to do exactly what they did last year, because they don't have a lot of good pitching. I mean, they did need a midseason trade of my pitcher to watch being Justin Verlander, 7-3, 3.31 ERA and 11 starts for Houston since being reacquired from the New York Mets. Overall 13-8, 3.22 ERA. And his ERA against the Twins, 2.76, 40 career starts, 22-10. It's a pretty good stat for a pitcher who just has had to really labor a lot this year, but got through the season relatively clean, didn't start until May. And I'm very interested to see, because it seemed like the Astros needed Verlander more than Verlander needed the Astros, which is why they got him back. And this is what's going to happen. Verlander's postseason success was kind of switched around last year, and I'm kind of very interested to see if that can continue, because they're going to need him, because after him and Framber Valdez, who was 12-11, there's not a lot left, although Valdez did have a no-hitter this year as well. On the Minnesota side, how about the story of Royce Lewis, who was just really a prospect who was kind of fading a little bit in their system, and now is in the middle of their lineup. And in game 1 of the series versus the Blue Jays, he hit a home run in his first 2 career postseason plate appearances, still playing and still in the playoffs, Evan Longoria. He's now with the Diamondbacks. He did that in 2008, by the way. And definitely not playing, and definitely not in the playoffs, Gary Gaetti. He did that way back in 1987 when me and Anthony were just a mere 3 years old. But Royce Lewis is a very young player. He only had 70 games of regular season experience before this year, 58 this year himself, and he had 15 home runs and 52 RBIs, and basically played a third of a season. So he's going to be a big part in the middle of the lineup, because Carlos Correa is still a little up and down. But Twins have had a damn good run, and I'm very interested to see how this continues. Okay, moving on to the pitcher, and I'm sorry, we're going to have to continue the Yankees trend. Sonny Gray had the 3rd best ERA in the AL this year at 2.79, which is only topped by his rookie year and his 3rd year way back in 13 and 15 in Oakland. The Yankees seasons were tough, to say the least, but since he's been in Minnesota, he has gone 16 and 13. Labored a little bit in game 2 versus the Blue Jays, but he got the job done in getting the team to their first postseason victory since 2014.
you need a bulldog, and I think Sonny Gray is going to do that. Had the most innings pitched since 2015 this year as well. He pitched 184 innings, and he started 32 games. So very interested to see what Sonny Gray can do on the mound. He'll probably be a game 2 or game 3 starter. Okay, so I'm going to take a deep breath. And now we go on to the final series, and that's the Dodgers, who are finding themselves in an NLDS series versus a division rival. Last year, it was the San Diego Padres. This year, it's the Arizona Diamondbacks. Ironically enough, it's the same domination. In fact, this is worse. If you remember, in 2016, the Dodgers celebrated a division clinching in the Arizona Diamondbacks Chase Field pool. And then when they played in the postseason in 2017, the Diamondbacks made sure that game 3, they swept the series, that they blocked the pool with horses so they didn't have the chance to do the same thing again. So for the Diamondbacks to make sure they don't have to spend the money on horses this time, they have some studs in their rotation. One of the people out there has to be I can't even talk right now. Why did we decide to do all of this?
This is what we do.
I know. I should. So their big hit. Let's talk about the pitcher first. And Zach Gallen, what a year he's had. He is a Cy Young candidate on the NL side. He has just been outstanding. Not really good versus the Dodgers this year. That's going to be a little bit of a problem, I think. But game 2 didn't have his best stuff against the Milwaukee Brewers. And he got himself right in a hurry. Got through 6 innings, won 17 games this year. He is definitely somebody to look out for who's going to probably start game 2. He'll be able to start game 2 also, by the way, on regular rest. Something that possibly couldn't have happened if the Diamondbacks had to play a game 3 and he would have been available in the bullpen. So it's going to be very interesting to see what Zach Gallen can do in a big postseason start against the Dodgers lineup that is pretty insane, even for a team that wasn't the juggernaut that they were last year in the regular season. Corbin Carroll, though, is a big-time stud and is going to be the NL Rookie of the Year, and that's not even a question. First rookie ever to perform not a Ronald Acuna like line, but a 25-50. That is 25 home runs and 54 stolen bases. He will be the runaway Rookie of the Year winner, and he is just a guy who knows how to hit. 285 average, 506 slugging percentage, an OPS of 868. And I just like everything about the youth of this team. This is not a team that did a lot past the All-Star break. They were 25-34, I believe, but still had a very good September, had a very good August to get themselves back in it, and just kind of like the rest of the NL struggled through the rest of the season to get here. The Dodgers owned the Arizona Diamondbacks over the years. In fact, they've won the season series from them 5 consecutive seasons. And the record from 2010 to 2020 to 2022, not so good. Arizona was 10-38 against Los Angeles in those 3 years. So anything can happen in October, though. Let's see. All right. For the Dodgers, as we're almost done, thank God. Freddie Freeman was very likely, it's probably going to end up being second or third in the MVP voting. I don't know where Mookie Betts is going to place. He'll probably place second. Acuna is going to win it by a landslide, but 331 average, just a pedestrian 29 home run, 102 RBI season. We know what Freddie Freeman can do for the postseason with the Braves. We know that the lineup is essentially a pick your poison, but this team knows that they're going to have to do a lot of the little things. The target is not on their backs this year. The target is squarely on the backs of the Braves in their historic season. I am very curious to see what Freeman can do for an encore. I mean, Mookie Betts is the all-everything person on this team, but you know that not all of the bats can hit at once. The Dodgers, they did win the World Series in 2020, but their postseason history is checkered, to say the least. And they just have to get over this hump, and that'll be a big help to get done with the Diamondbacks pretty quickly, because after that game one that they had against the Padres last year, they didn't really take care of business, losing the last 3 straight. Okay. Now, in a twist of fate for the Dodgers, the bullpen is scary as hell. You don't want to get to the bullpen of this team. They have 4 or 5 arms that can shut you down. Unfortunately for the Dodgers, they need a starting pitcher to get to the bullpen. That's the way baseball works. And for the Dodgers, Clayton Kershaw stayed pretty healthy. This could be the final season of his career. He had 13 wins, best in the rotation, 2.46, best ERA, best in the rotation, and pitched 131 2/3 innings, best in the rotation. But just the injuries to this staff. Tony Gonsolin, out. Walker Buehler, out for probably 2 years. Julio Urias, never probably going to play again in the major leagues. So Lance Lynn is going to start game 3 of this series. I don't even know if people realized, the common person, that Lance Lynn was still pitching in baseball. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the Dodgers do. But if they can get good starts from Clayton Kershaw in this postseason, that will set the table for the rest of the team. And if they can get 5 or 6 good innings out of all of their starters, this team is going to be a very formidable one. But if they can't, it's going to be the typical postseason exit. I'm done.
Rabbi, it's funny. It's like I remarked to you guys over text last night when the sweepage was complete in the wild card round. I mean, that in itself was crazy. Didn't see that coming. A complete, a 4 for 4 in that regard. Granted, it made our lives easier in terms of putting these previews together for you, our audience. But here's the other thing, the interesting thing that came out of it for me. The fact that there's no game 3 in any of these series means the wild card teams that advanced actually have their starting rotations in better shape than they would against some of these juggernaut teams that got buys in the first, to the division series, than they would if they'd had to use one of them in a game 3. You think about it, for most of these wild card teams, their best or second best, their best pitcher is going to be available to
game 2.
Worst pitch game 2. And if
they'll have them on regular rest game 2.
Right, exactly. Which definitely makes things should make some of these series a little more competitive than if some of those wild card teams had to go to further into their rotation for game 1 or game 2.
Yeah, you mentioned the Diamondbacks, and this is against Milwaukee. I think they only used like maybe 4 or 5 pitchers. They did not go deep and say a bullpen whatsoever. So they are
with the
in
Rangers.
Very good shape. And then you look at the Phillies. Zach Wheeler is pretty much lined up for game 2, and you got Nola for the game 3 on regular rest back in Philadelphia. So a lot of these series, because they ended in 2 games, the teams that advanced to the wild card, they were in really good shape.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now you look at the teams that had the wild card bye in the division series, they got to worry about rust and not playing for almost a week with some of these guys. And you got starters who are now going to be playing and who are pitching with longer rest than they would have usually had during the regular season. So it's always a topic of rest versus momentum, and now we're going to really see that.
Yep. Remember this: 3 series last year ended in sweeps for the wild card series, and in the ALDS, 2 underdogs, both in the NL, 1 outright. The Yankees got pushed to 5 games by the Cleveland Guardians, and the Astros basically went in a 4-game series against the Seattle Mariners, except game 3 was 2 games. So that kind of shows a little bit of precedent for it.
Yep, there you go. It'll be interesting.
Unfortunately, we are
contractually obligated.
We are very contractually obligated to talk about the locals in the National Football League. And we'll start with the Giants because, frankly, just like golf, low score wins. So the Giants are perfect for low scoring. In 40 years, 4-0, back to 1979 again, there has been no team in the NFL who has scored as few points as the Giants have in their first 2 home games. 40-0 Cowboys week 1, 24-3 Seahawks week 4. 3 points, 2 games. Not good news. What good news? They don't have to be at home the next week. They can be on the road. That's great. And they're playing the Dolphins and the Bills, including the biggest kryptonite to Daniel Jones, a night game in Buffalo. All right. With all that being said, Jay, put whatever disaster positive week 4. Go.
Okay. On the last show we did 2 weeks ago, I told you guys that finding anything positive from the Jets' 30-10 loss to Dallas was a real struggle and a challenge. I think trying to find one in the aftermath of the 24-3 debacle that was the Giants' loss to Seattle on Monday Night Football was even harder. I was talking to Joe Tafaro about it, and he was pretty blunt in saying that there were no positive takeaways to be found. Overlapping pass routes making it easier for the Seahawks coverage to either break up passes or prevent them entirely, resulting in sacks or interceptions. Stupid penalties, 6 on special teams, including an unnecessary roughness on a kickoff, ineligible player downfield, any illegal shift on punts, lazy blocking leading to strip sacks, the offensive line running past defenders, trying to max protect to give Daniel Jones time to throw, but not giving him an outlet to dump the ball off when nothing downfield materialized. All that, plus yet another exhibition of the poor tackling that has plagued the defense all season. So he had to really dig deep for anything even remotely positive. And here's what he came up with. Wide receiver Wan'Dale Robinson finally looked healthy. And he did. He had 5 catches on a team-high 6 targets for 40 yards. And as an honest positive, that was an honest positive. He had a couple of sarcastic ones that wide receiver Jalen Hyatt and tight end Darren Waller would be well rested for the next 12 games because if Monday night was any indicator, they'd rarely be seeing passes thrown their way. They combined for just 5 catches on 5 targets for 31 yards. And then he landed on the only Giant who actually did his job, punter Jamie Gillen. I actually had to go look this up. Gillen had 5 punts. His gross average, 53.6. His net, 45 flat. 2 of the 5 punts were down inside the 20. Only 1 landed in the end zone for a touchback, and only 1 was returned for 23 yards. You throw in Graham Gano's 55-yard field goal for the only New York points, and that's all there is. So unless you kick the ball for the Giants, or you were, Kayvon Thibodeau, who had 2 sacks and a near pick 6 on a Seahawks screen pass in the second quarter. Unless you kicked the ball for the Giants, you stunk up the Meadowlands something fierce. Now, it's always positive when your specialists are legit weapons, getting you points on long field goals when drives stall on the other side of the 50 on offense, or flipping the field when your offense can't get out of its own end, as it allows you to play complementary football. Getting that consistently is a necessity and a key point to a successful season, but not if it's the only part of the team that's operating correctly. Watching Jones running for his life while getting hit over and over again, 14 quarterback hits to go with those 10 sacks. The 11th, if you guys remember, was on a botched wide receiver option. And being under pressure on 20% of his 34 dropbacks brought back bad memories of David Carr, who was sacked an average of 64 times in his 3 full seasons, and they were his first full 3 seasons in the league with the Houston Texans. And he's the most sacked quarterback in each of those seasons. The 76 sacks he took in 2002 is still the NFL record. Jones was sacked 44 times over 16 games last season. That's less than 3 times per game. He's been sacked 22 times over his first 4 games this season. That's a pace to get dropped 88 times. Yes, Jones made some bad reads leading to bad throws Monday night. Seattle's rookie cornerback Devin Witherspoon's 97-yard pick 6 when the Giants had moved the ball inside the Seahawks 10-yard line down 14-3 with a chance to get back within 4 was the worst of them. But what made it even more alarming Was Weatherspoon telling NFL Network after the game that he knew that Jones, quote, liked to stare down his first target, which helped him jump the route. But the mess that the Giants offense has become goes beyond their quarterback. The Giants have been outscored 77-9 in the first half this season. That's a pretty big knock on Brian Daboll's coaching staff and their ability to have the players ready to play, especially the offense, which is his forte, when you consider the whole first 15 plays being scripted thing, and those plays supposedly being the ones you feel will work best out of the gate against your opponent. Does Jamie Gillen and Graham Gano continuing to bail the Giants out with their legs a positive that needs to continue this week? 100%. Absolutely. But if they're the only ones living up to the back of their football cards, then it's going to be a very long and very desolate season for the primary tenants of MetLife Stadium.
And ironically enough, the punter does not have a football card the last time I checked, by the way. By the way, the most hilarious part of that whole, not the hilarious part, but the biggest three players of that game on Monday, Witherspoon, drafted number 5 in the draft. That was the Broncos pick that the Seahawks got traded. And the drive that made it 14-3, orchestrated by Drew Lock, traded to the Seahawks in that Broncos trade, and Noah Fant traded to the Seahawks in that Broncos trade. So the gift that keeps on giving is immediately struck down on the Giants on Monday night. So speaking of striking down on the Giants on Monday night, where do you want to go, Anthony?
I tried to kind of narrowly focus my
I feel like you tried to narrowly focus on how pathetic thing that Anthony was about
I wanted to give you as many choices as possible to choose from.
But you talked about the most important thing, and that's the line. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, as I said to Joe when we were talking about it, I said Anthony for once has the easy job this week.
Not when you go first, though, apparently.
No, look, the offensive line is the most obvious one here. I mean, I made jokes. I was like, you can put Joe Montana back there, and he's not going to survive when no one blocking for you whatsoever.
Right.
11 sacks, and it looked like it could have been 20 because it was that bad. Look, Andrew Thomas is already hurt. That's number one. Then you look at the fact that they lost another lineman on a touch push play on 4th and 1. That they went down another lineman. When you look at this offensive line, and when the simplest thing you can do is pass block, and you can't do that, I don't think it really matters what kind of weapons you have outside. When the quarterback is running for his life, the only reason why Daniel Jones' sack rate isn't higher than 27% because he can actually move and run. He's athletic.
But led the team in rushing, 10 carries, 66 yards.
Yeah. The Giants, they've allowed 18 sacks through 2 home games this season, which is now the most in NFL history. The previous owners of that record was, guess what? Their Meadowlands co-tenants, the New York Jets, back in 1987. See that, Bob? We have another 1987 reference. That's 2 on the show. But also, like I said, Andrew Thomas was hurt. John Michael Smith is the guy that got the old lineman that got injured on the 4th and 1 box play. By the way, Brian Daboll even admitted the team don't even practice the play. Why would you call a play you don't practice on a 4th and 1 situation in the middle of the game? That is, like I said,
the fact that they have not practiced Philly's version of the quarterback sneak. This is a copycat league. And you saw how successful it was. They play in your division. How have you not been practicing that since the first snap of OTAs?
The Chicago Bears tonight had ran that play twice and was 2 for 2 in the first quarter for that matter. But look at that Pro Football Focus. They've made the Giants offensive line grade as the 2nd worst pass blocking unit, 2nd worst run blocking unit, and 2nd worst overall unit in all of the NFL. The Seahawks was 49th in pass defense coming into that game. They allowed 300-yard passing to Matt Stafford, 300 yards and 361 yards to Andy Dalton in week 3.
Come on now. He is the red rifle after all.
Well, no knock and disrespect to Andy Dalton, but we know his best years as assistant.
Behind him, yes.
We
yes.
know that. But the guy, Jones has been pressured the most times in about 68 times, hurried the most 49, has been forced to scramble more than any other quarterback. That's 13 times. He's been sacked 22 times, second most in the NFL. Only Sam Howell of the Washington Commanders, who was been sacked a couple more times tonight, has been sacked more in the NFL. And look, Daniel Jones, we're gonna pick him apart. The special teams was also atrocious too, but the idiotic penalties, the defense, the poor tackling, you hit everything on there. Daniel Jones is low hanging fruit because of the contract he got in the offseason and the fact that many people felt like he didn't deserve it. But let's be honest, you can give Terry Bradshaw, Joe Montana, Steve Young, any Hall of Fame quarterback you can think of, and put them behind this giant offensive line and realize they don't have a snowball's chance in hell of staying right side up. What literally every nail, by the way, every nail, shut the hell up. Attacking the fans is not going to get you any sympathy in this league, particularly when you are on camera blocking your own teammate because of miscommunication on a stunt.
Did he learn nothing from the Mets? Come on now.
No.
Or the Knicks or any other New York team that's done this.
Go.
And it's just like you put any quarterback behind this old line, man, and they can't stay right side up. They have no chance whatsoever. And what offense can you run when no matter what you do or what you call, the quarterback is under duress within 2 seconds of a play being developed? And,
right.
And it's like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what you can talk about. How bad this offensive line has been outside of the one half in Arizona.
And Anthony, I got to agree with you. And for all of the people, and this is my thing about quarterbacks getting too much credit when it's good and too much blame when it's bad. What the Giants chose to pay Daniel Jones this offseason has absolutely no bearing on what he has or has not been able to do to this in the season to this point. And yes, you can talk about the fact that the Giants' offensive scheme is very, basic. It's not complex. They do their best to play to the strengths of their key players. And yes, maybe the book is out on the scheme that Dable and Kafka ran last year that was so successful. Maybe it's out and teams have enough tape on, what they've done with Jones and the boots and the design runs and everything else. But here's the thing. It does, and you can talk about, if only Saquon was healthy. I don't care if Saquon was playing at an all-pro level. If the line can't protect Daniel Jones when he tries to drop back to pass, and they haven't shown they can open holes no matter who the running back is, it doesn't matter how much Saquon takes heat off of Jones and makes it easier for him. No offensive player, skill position player right now is going to have anything remotely easy because this line cannot do its job. If you can't win in the trenches, it doesn't matter how good the guys who are behind the line or on the perimeter are. If there's no time for the ball to be given to them or there's no space for them to run once they get it.
I would like to see the floor to my next comment because we've been on for a while now. So, speaking of no chance, here come the Miami Dolphins, a popular survivor pick in a lot.
They'll be mine this weekend.
There you go.
And that was determined before Monday Night Football, so that was just further. That was confirmation bias.
Big time icing on the cake. And Tua Tagovailoa is the guy that has led them. Now, I'm going to get to the bad first. Last week, a lot of the Bills did a very good job clogging the passing lanes, making it hard for him to find his receivers. And that killed him because eventually he was going to throw a pick and did in the third quarter down 34-20 and to Micah Hyde. That was pretty much it. He did go 25 for 35, though, with 282 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. So if that's a bad game for Tua Tagovailoa, sign me up for Tua Tagovailoa because outside of a certain San Francisco quarterback by the name of Brock Purdy, who the Giants have also faced this year, nobody has had a better passer rating. In the first, and his completion percentage is what is the best. 71% last week, even though he only threw for 8.1 yards per average and did get sacked 4 times, which definitely led to a very low QBR of 55.1. Don't know how that still works. But then
100 is the best.
I know what that is. I just don't understand how it works in relation to everything else. But I know it's because it's as of 100 because ESPN thinks we're too fucking dumb to understand what the original QB rating system is. And honestly, it is.
I have the formula for the NFL's passer rating somewhere.
I figured you would, and don't say it on air.
No,
Okay.
I don't honestly remember it. But
I would not
as I constantly tell you guys, all you need to know, 158.3 is perfect.
That we know. That I know. That I understand for some strange reason more than the QBR system. Okay. 88.5% completion percentage against Denver in that 70-20 win, which was the third most points scored, fourth most points scored in the modern NFL. That's the modern NFL. Nobody has gotten that high in almost 50 years. So this team, again, Tua is the guy that makes this engine go. You can mention Tyreek Hill. You can mention their running game, especially Devin Achane, the rookie
Raheem
from Texas
Mostert.
A&M. Mostert, although he only got 9 yards last week, my fantasy football team did mourn a little bit because of that. But overall, this Dolphins team is pretty much in any way you want to get killed type scenario. This is a game that does seem a little fishy, pun intended, because of how the Dolphins came into this game. So I'm very curious to see what the greatest show in Florida can give us this week, because it's a little bit of a game that you need to get yourself up for a little bit. In fact, the Dolphins have even said they want Saquon to come back in this game to give themselves a little bit of an offensive test. Because again, as I said before to you guys Monday, yes, I understand that the line cannot do its job. No one can do it on this team. However, the offensive play calling was very unimaginative in the entire game. And honestly, on some of those plays that were into the red zone, the green zone, or whatever you want to call that, it's both. I've seen it called the green zone, but I don't remember which one I was thinking of. But they just had no imaginative plays, and the reason why this team was just struggling was the fact that they kicked the field goal in their opening drive, and that really didn't kick the field goal in the drive. They missed on fourth down their opening drive. That really just set the tone for that whole entire game.
The thing I want to know, and I doubt we're going to get an answer one way or another. I want to know if Brian Daboll is taking over a little bit more of the play calling, because as you guys will remember, he talks about how he has a play sheet all the time. Yeah. Why is he pulling the offensive coordinator move, holding it up in front of his face while he's talking, if all he's really doing is having a conversation up in the box with Kafka? You don't need to cover your face to do that. Just makes me.
If that's the case, I think we know what needs to be done in terms of that.
But it was very much a Joe Judge era type offense.
Like I said, that second year curse is coming right back to haunt them. Joe Judge, Bob McAdoo, and possibly Brian Daboll. All right, the Jets. They also had a loss in Week 4, also at MetLife Stadium, also to a Western power. But my friend, not all losses are created equal. I don't remember what philosopher said that, but it's true. A 17-0 first quarter lead for Kansas City that had all of the Swifties going crazy ended up being a knockdown, drag out 23-20 loss. One where the Jets got the score tied, but then Patrick Mahomes did Patrick Mahomes things, as Jay likes to say, and didn't give the ball back.
To do.
Yes, and didn't give the ball back to Zach Wilson after the Jets after Wilson fumbled the snap mid-fourth quarter. And that Zach Wilson guy, he had a career game, which we'll talk about in a second. They have a Broncos team coming off a similar high, but they got the dub in a win Week 4 at the Chicago Bears. That same Broncos.
Was it a mile high? Was it a mile high?
that same Broncos team that got a 70-20 ass kicking in week number 3, and that same Broncos team whose head coach said that the offensive coordinator of the team that he's playing had the worst coaching performance of all time last year. Oh, and the Jets have heard that, and the Jets are hungry. But Jay, back to that Zach Wilson guy. Is this a turning point his Sunday game was?
We'll see. I mean, it's what a difference a week makes, or more appropriately for us, the three of us here, 2 weeks, as that was the last time we talked about Zach Wilson. And the last time we did, it was not pretty. I don't think any of us would have thought that a Sunday night football game against the defending Super Bowl champs, with the defending NFL MVP taking the snaps on the other side, would be the game where Zach Wilson finally played quarterback the way the Jets had envisioned he would when they made him the number 2 pick in the 2021 draft. Check out some of Wilson's numbers coming into Sunday Night Football. Per True Media, Wilson ranked last among 34 qualifying quarterbacks in completion percentage, 52.4. Last at passer rating, 57. EPA per dropback, negative 0.3. And his average time to throw, 3.12 seconds, is the longest in the NFL. He also ranked 31st on pass attempts, traveling 20 plus yards, 31st in touchdown to interception ratio, 32nd in yards per pass attempt, 5.6. Pro Football Focus ranked him 32nd out of 34 qualifying quarterbacks with only one big time throw in 84 pass attempts. Through the first 3 weeks, Wilson had thrown 4 picks, just 2 TDs, and the Jets had managed only 3 offensive touchdowns total, and were averaging a mere 12 points per game and 133 yards passing per game. Sunday night against the Chiefs, Wilson had one of the best games of his career, 28 of 39, 71.9% completion, 245 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, a 105.2 passer rating. He was only sacked twice. It was his first career game with more than 23 completions, as well as the first with multiple TD passes and no interceptions. Wilson had more completions, more passing yards, and more touchdown passes, and fewer interceptions than Mahomes, becoming the first quarterback to outplay Patrick Mahomes in 127 career games across college and the NFL, including the postseason for the Chiefs quarterback. Wilson's attempt at a clean sheet came to an end with 7:24 remaining in the fourth quarter when he fumbled a snap as the Jets were driving and looking to match the Chiefs' fourth quarter go-ahead score. The loss drops the Jets to 1-3, and Kansas City escaped with an ugly win to improve to 3-1. Now, regarding the fumble, Wilson said, quote, "It's on me. Critical situation. I can't have a play like that. I cannot drop the ball. This team is sacrificing a lot. Guys are making plays. Defense was making plays. O-line was protecting. Receivers were making plays. To be driving right there, to drop a snap, I cannot do that. I lost us that game, and I cannot do that." Now, that is a level of accountability we haven't previously seen from Wilson, and it's something that very much resonated with his teammates. We also saw a change in play calling from the much maligned, as Rabbi alluded to earlier, offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett, something that I spoke about on our last show. Hackett worked in more play action into the game script, as well as getting Wilson out of the pocket, and it worked. Hackett finally seemed to have real obvious true quarterback, which is that he's at his best when he's slinging it, getting out of the pocket, taking shots downfield, throwing on the move using his legs. Wilson completed 7 of 8 off play action per True Media after going 8 of 15 in the first 3 games. He was also 3 of 5 on pass attempts that traveled more than 20 yards in the air after going 1 for 6 on those type of attempts in the first 3 games. He was also 6 of 11 while under pressure, which he was on 38.1% of his dropbacks after being 13 for 36 previously over the first 3 games under that same type of pressure. Now, Hackett also worked in more of the quick passing game, which is another thing that I mentioned on our last show, and it was effective. Wilson threw 21 passes in less than 2.5 seconds against the Chiefs, completed 17 of them per True Media. Both the attempts and the completions were career high. For his career, when his time to throw averaged more than 2.5 seconds, Wilson's completion percentage is 44%. When his time to throw is averaged less than 2.5 seconds, his career completion percentage is 70.8. Wilson's best pass of the game was his 10-yard touchdown to Allen Lazard, an absolute dime into a tight window where only the veteran wide receiver could get it. Wilson was 5 for 5 for 75 yards on that drive, the Jets' first of the second half, with 2 of those 5 completions thrown into tight windows. for a plus 44.1 completion percentage over expectation. We finally saw what can happen when the quarterback doesn't play scared out of fear of making mistakes, and the offensive coordinator doesn't call plays based on a fear of his quarterback making those mistakes. Now, both of them changed their approach this week, realizing that fear could no longer be a part of the game plan. Veteran wide receiver Randall Cobb saw the effect of the change in the plan, saying, quote, "I haven't been here long, but to see his maturity throughout these last few months, through all the negativity, through all the noise, continuing to fight, continuing to push, we told him we got your back. He took some chances tonight and they paid off. He's been wanting to make these throws, but he's been so worried about mistakes, turnovers, and he has the ability. He showed it tonight." Zach Rosenblatt, the Jets beat writer for The Athletic, had a great line in his piece Monday talking about Wilson's performance, and it's one that had me saying, I wish I'd written that. Here it is. It's as if Wilson trudged through the sewer like Andy Dufresne in The Shawshank Redemption, and now he finally sees the light. It was only one game, not enough to wipe away his history, but Wilson did something on Sunday night that he hadn't really done at all since getting drafted second overall in 2021. He let it rip. If Wilson can keep letting it rip, then maybe this season won't be the lost cause that Jets Nation feared it would be once Aaron Rodgers went down.
Well, this is the must-win game, really, of that whole entire list. So, Anthony,
absolutely, Rabbi,
there are some fixings that need to be done in this game, or in this team. Although, who knows when Zach Wilson will be next week? For God's sakes, It's a week-to-week roller coaster. What's your negative going into week number 5?
First off, I love Shawshank Redemption. That's one of my favorite movies. It was actually on TV a couple nights ago, by the way.
Such a great line, by the way. I wish someone else had wrote it.
And look, if Zach Wilson could walk away with thousands of money and at least the Jets victories the way Andy Dufresne walked away with thousands of his money at the end of that movie, I think Jet fans would absolutely take it.
Yeah.
But I gotta be honest. If the Giants made my life easier as far as finding that negative, the Jets made it harder because I literally walked away from that Sunday night game thinking that was the most inspiring Jet performance I've seen this season. That includes beating Buffalo in week 1 after Aaron Rodgers went down. I mean, this team got punched in the mouth by the defending champs on national television with all the Swifties watching. The defense, it didn't look like they were going to get ran out of the stadium. They gave up a 48-yard touchdown run in the first quarter. They're down 17-0 before you know it. And they held the Chiefs just 3 points after halftime. And it's not easy to make Patrick Mahomes make mistakes. And they were doing a number of good things. They were pressuring Mahomes. They had him obviously missing his marks. They picked him off a couple of times. And yes, that was an interception at the end. It was a bad holding penalty called on Sauce Gardner. I think we all know that. But if there was a nitpicking thing that I had to say about the Jets defense was that they gave up big plays at ill-opportune times. The third and long, they gave up a long scramble for Patrick Mahomes on that drive that did keep the clock running, and the Jets eventually did not get the ball back. And also on the 3rd and 8, when he basically ran to the 3-yard line, slid to put and slid. I know that hurt a lot of gamblers out there, but he put the game away. So, I feel like I'm nitpicking a little bit as far as my negatives of the Jets, but there is one that I will point out, and that is Dalvin Cook. I'll be 100% honest. When this Jet offense is thriving, it's because Breece Hall is in the backfield. I feel like they need to get him the ball a lot more. He needs to be the focal point in this offense. Look at the yards per rush. Breece Hall is close to 10 yards per rush, 9.3. Dalvin Cook is 3.2. It just seems like I think Dalvin Cook is, because he didn't play all line in the preseason, I don't know how much that had to do with it, but it's clear that he has not found his groove or his comfort level in this offense.
His legs,
so far,
according to Robert Sell.
And I just feel like right now, Breece Hall, because there was reports that he's no longer going to be on a pitch count. By the way, he's going back to the stadium where he was injured last season. I think Brees Hall should be the primary running back. I mean, he is technically as a starter, but I think he does need to get the ball more as far as not just carries, but also calling some more passive plays for him. Let him get the use of speed to his advantage a little bit. Devin Cook, you bring him in. If you gotta spell Hall for a couple of plays, let him get some rest. But other than that, those are only really the negatives, and also Greg Zuerlein missed a field goal that ultimately cost the Jets because the margin of defeat was 3 points. But other than that, this is probably one of the best Jet efforts I've seen in a very long time. They played aspired, they played hard, they, like I said, they got punched in the mouth, they punched right back, and it was unfortunate that they won it because of a costly penalty that a lot of people, myself included, disagree with, that they were not able to get the ball back. I would have loved to see what Zach Wilson would have been able to do with a chance to either tie or win the game, had he been able to get the ball back. But you know what? Because,
I want
to. So
I want to address the penalty for a second. You can't I understand Jay's comment of you call it in the beginning of the game, you call it at the end of the game. However, something like that is just so subjective, and we tried this before in terms of reviewing pass interference and penalties like that, and it didn't work. So when you're late in the game and you do something as obvious as Sauce did, which you see was noticeable, was obvious, it's going to get called.
Yeah.
I understand that many people doesn't think it should get called, but when you're in there, you have to know that something like that could very much be called in that situation. So as much as there was a lot of controversy of the NFL then immediately posting that the Chiefs are 2-0 as Swifties and the NFL having to take that down immediately, so it didn't seem, but they were biased towards anybody, you just have to remember, because I think this Jets defense doesn't understand sometimes, and I think it was a negative a little bit in the game, that you're going to have to be a little more clean even when you're the underdog. I think that's a fair thing to say. And I don't, go ahead, just very quickly.
I would say this too, that one of the things I did have the problem with was the fact that they allowed a lot of contact throughout the game. And this is both sides. That was the one I would point out. But also the penalty, the flag being thrown late after the interception. I'm like, that was the one. That was where I had the issue with. It's like, okay,
a lot of people thought it was a block.
You gotta get that out there right away, because regardless if it was an interception or not, if it was an interception, you put up the question of, was you throwing a flag had it not been an interception, which some Jet players did bring up, and fans in the media did bring up. But
it's going to get bring up when something affects the outcome of the game. That's completely understood. People want players to be the ones that solve the game, and I think I hate to say it. Let me finish my point, guys. Let me finish my point for a second, and then you guys can go. I think a lot of people I think one of the hardest things to do in all of sports is be a ref, because you're never, especially at the social media age, going to get the respect you deserve. But a lot of people want you to sit down, shut up, and throw the flag at the right particular time that they want. And it's really annoying. I wish I could get on a rant on this, but we don't have
to. And that's the thing. And I agree with you, Rabbi. And I have often felt that way. And, since we've, had access to Joe Tafaro these last few years, and Joe being a ref, when he's not here talking football with us, I've had a greater understanding of what actually goes into that job. And look, flags seem to be thrown late. Because sometimes we don't see the official, so we don't know. Did the flag get stuck in his pocket or whatnot, or did something else? Or maybe he just took a second to replay it in his head and make sure he was right about it. So you don't know. It's not an easy thing to be an official in the NFL. And look, I have railed on this show about what I have felt is the subjectiveness with which refs call defensive pass interference, and to a lesser extent, defensive holding. I've equated it to the way umpires in baseball call a strike zone. No two of them do it the same. But here's the thing, and the whole thing about don't let the refs decide the game. You don't want the refs to decide the game. Don't put them in a position where they have to make a call. And this is the other thing. You are Sauce Gardner. You're considered, even as a second-year guy, one of the best cover corners in the game. You know what you can and cannot get away with. You know that you cannot put yourself in even the slightest position where the ref can think for a second, you can't do that. You're other cornerbacks who don't have your pedigree, don't have your experience, don't have your talent. That's one thing. Sauce, I understand your frustration. I do. But dude, you of all people, of all the guys on this defense, cannot put yourself in a position with a game on the line to give the ref even a minute of doubt as to whether or not he should throw that flag. Because if he has a minute of doubt, he's going to throw it.
By the way, I believe that was the highest rated game this year outside of the opener. So a very good job to the schedule makers of that one. So let's move on because I'm tired. Anyway, on Tuesday, the puck drops on another NHL season. And if you recall last year, I don't want to say this with all the luck this area has had so far in 2023. All three locals went to the playoffs. Yeah! So let's do a quick storyline talk about three locals in 23-24. Jay, I'm going to start with you on this one because you have that thing in the logo that we don't like. So Rangers season begins 1 week from tonight. That would be Thursday at Buffalo. What are you looking at after their 7-game first-round knockout last year against New Jersey and the beginning of the Peter Laviolette era?
Yeah, I mean, and obviously, one of the bigger storylines is what Laviolette's going to bring to this team that they didn't get from, Gerard Gallant. But we talked in depth about Laviolette when he was hired, so I'm not going to go over that old ground. But in terms of players, I was looking at who on this team kind of has the most to prove coming into the season, who's in a make or break type situation, and I kind of settled on Alexis Lafreniere. And it's kind of, is it due to unfair expectations of A, being a number 1 overall pick, and 2, playing in this market? Maybe, but this is where we are now. New Rangers head coach Peter Laviolette cautioned everyone not to read too much into how the lines were assembled at the start of training camp, but halfway through the preseason schedule and towards the end of camp, highly touted 2021 number 1 overall pick Alexis Lafreniere was still getting reps at right wing on the Blue Shirts' number 1 line with Chris Kreider and Mika Zibanejad. Now, some of you may recall that Lafreniere started at right wing alongside those two guys to open the 2021-2022 season, but that the experiment didn't last long as former head coach Gerard Gallant never seemed convinced that Lafreniere could make the switch fully from left wing to right wing. Now, Lafreniere has said that flipping sides isn't that big of a difference, and that getting the number of reps he's received at right wing during practice in the exhibition games has been helpful in his getting used to it. Now, Laviolette concurred, saying at one point during training camp that, quote, he hasn't come over to us telling us that he just can't figure out how to get out on the right wing. I don't think it affects him really that much. I think the more he does it, the more he just stays with it. That's an opportunity to possibly look at him in the top 6 or power play situations. Now, being in the spotlight's nothing unusual for Lafreniere, being, as I said, drafting as high as he was in the city where he is. But there have been more negatives than positives in his 3 seasons at Madison Square Garden. There hasn't been much of an opportunity granted for Lafreniere to move up from the kid line, as the third line's been referred to, where he's played with Philip Chytil centering him and Capocacco, which has probably affected his development or lack thereof, depending on how you want to look at it. Insofar as the Rangers have Artemi Panarin and Chris Kreider ahead of him in the pecking order at left wing on the depth chart. So the move to right wing really is the only way he can get the type of shifts that he needs to show the team that he can meet the expectations that come with being a number 1 overall pick. Now he's on his 3rd coach and starting a 2nd contract that's paying him less than a third of what Tim Stolze, the number 3 pick in 2020, is getting from Ottawa. Now, Lafreniere's rookie season stood out for some wrong reasons relative to other players drafted number one, most notably Jack Hughes, the number one pick in 2019 by the Devils, who struggled a bit in his first season in the NHL, but has quickly developed into a superstar. The numbers say that across their first 7 post-draft seasons, the number one pick is expected to bring 17.7 wins to a lineup. The number two pick follows closely at 12.3. 3 years into his NHL career, Lafreniere isn't anywhere close to meeting that metric. And the fact that a guy who plays across the river from him kind of is another thing that Rangers fans have taken issue with. He had a physical and effective playoff run in 2022 after a regular season where his goal scoring at 5-on-5 stood out in comparison to the rest of the team. And then he put up 39 points on 16 goals and 23 assists last year while getting just 15 minutes and 13 seconds of ice time a night. But he was also a healthy scratch for a game in December, had a no-point playoff series against those Hughes-led Devils, which has led to plenty of questions about whether or not he could succeed in New York. We know that no two players develop at the same pace, but Lafreniere has yet to show the type of year-over-year progress that the Rangers are looking for. So to say that this is a make or break year for Alexis Lafreniere is as colossal an understatement as saying that the Grand Canyon is a little hole in the ground. The Rangers brought in veteran winger Blake Wheeler, but they'd really prefer not to have him playing on the number one line. Making the transition to right wing so he can stay on the number one line with a sniper like Kreider and a legit two-way playmaker like Zibanejad might be Lafreniere's last chance to show the Rangers that he can be a core part of their future. It's definitely the best chance he's had since putting the sweater on, and we're all hoping that he can pull this off.
Well, not Islanders fans, that's for sure. They don't really care. By the way, they're playing
the Devils fans, but you know.
Devils fans don't either. Devils fans will take the success of one
Jack Hughes.
All right. Anthony, the aforementioned Sabres that I mentioned, let's follow them now. They're going to go to Elmont and get the Islanders season going next Saturday. So for the Islanders, what's the storyline as they look to move on from a 6-game first-round loss last year against Carolina?
Well, in year 2 of the Lane Lambert era, the question is going to be, can this combination of Bo Horvat and Matthew Barzal actually gel? I mean, Horvat was obviously they acquired him in the trade deadline halfway through the season, and he struggled. Adjusting to a new team, a new setting. Also, Barzal went down for the rest of the season, just as the two were starting to play together. Harvin's stats with the Islanders. Give me just a second. I lost my place. He had 7 goals after the trade, whereas he had over 30 before it. So clearly he struggled. Barzal has started to was at center, now he's moved over to right wing, and with Harvin moving being in the middle. They were gelling. They had some chemistry. Obviously, Barzal had the injury last February, limiting him to 58 games. But his ability to be a playmaker is going to be key if he can stay on the ice, because that does open up so much for Harvin. And the Islanders, because it's such a defensive first opportunity team, they're going to need some offensive firepower. We remember how badly they struggled on a power play last year. They were ranked 30th in the regular season, and then the playoffs against Carolina, it was worse. 1 for 18 in that 6-game series loss to Carolina. The strength of this team is obviously Ilya Sorokin at goalie, but they're going to have to score some goals. And that's going to be one of the key things I'm looking at going into the season. Can they generate enough goals when they already have the goalie and somewhat of the same, they're pretty much the same team from a year ago that ended the season, that had their season ended in Elmont. So that's going to be one of the weakness, one of the question marks. Can this 1-2 combination get it together? Can they provide some much needed offensive firepower? And can the Islanders improve on the special teams? You think about this, the division that they're in with the Rangers, with the Devils, and with Carolina being obviously the top 3 teams. If the Islanders, who were couple of seasons ago in back-to-back conference finals. If the window of opportunity is even closing or close altogether. So the Islanders right now, it's going to be one of those teams that I can see fight for a wild card spot, as they won last season, and got in because the minor miracles, because the Penguins completely choked away an opportunity in the last week of the regular season. Or are they going to be a team that could possibly miss the playoffs altogether if a key injury to one of the key players, like what happened to Barzell, takes place at any point during the season?
And blew it and avoided Boston too, because of what Florida had done to Carolina did to Florida on that last night of the season. All right, I'm going to go back and mention my Broncos player to watch because I completely passed over that last time really quickly. So just quickly, it's Russell Wilson. We're playing against the Jets just because of the fact that I think he has been a much more accurate passer this year, 60.5% in that Big Ten 70-20 loss. I don't know if that means anything, but he's had 75% accuracy against Chicago last week, 79.4% accurate completion percentage against Las Vegas. Almost very few times they scored under 16 points. They've done that 3 times already. It's been the defense that's let down this Denver Broncos team this year. By the way, Jay, here's why I hate QBR. 133.5 QB rating for Russell Wilson in that game last week.
Passer
33 last week. 33.2. I'm sorry, 133.5 passer rating, 33.2 QBR. Make it make sense.
Yeah,
but
that's why you'll never see me use QBR on this show.
No, and I might not ever again after looking at some of these stats. But I think he's a guy who can definitely carve a Jets team up that if he makes the right moves. And I think he hasn't regained the fastball that he had back in Seattle, but he's definitely not the cause of Denver's 1-3 start this year. And Denver only lost those first 2 games by a total of 3 points and won their game against Chicago by 3 points. But again, they lost the 3 by 50. All right. Let's get to the Devils. So my storyline is the consistent goaltending that they're going to be between Vitek Vanacek and Akira Schmid. Vanacek, who came over from the Capitals, I believe, became a starting goaltender last year for his first time in the NHL, and he was 33-11-4, 2.45 goals against average, 9-11 save percentage, and 3 shutouts. That was his first 52 games. In his last 10, he was 5-4-1, 898 save percentage in 10 games. And then the postseason came, and the Rangers put it on him in those first 2 games, and he really didn't gain anything back. He was pulled in game 3, which we'll talk about Schmidt in a second. Did come back in the end of the Carolina series because they just found no consistent goaltending then. But in those 7 playoff games that he had last year, 1-3, 4.64 goals against average and an 8.25 save percentage. Not what you want from a starting goaltender. You want someone obviously up in the 900s probably to be a consistent starter. Schmid in the regular season last year, 9-5-2, 2.13 goals against average and a 9.22 save percentage in 18 regular season games and only 14 starts. Postseason, though, he was the reason why the Devils beat the Rangers in that best of 7 series because he brought a new style, and the Rangers just, as an older team, just could not find the ways to get past the younger goaltender. He's only 23. I know Vanacek is 27, but he is more of a rough and tough veteran when it comes to the numbers. But Schmid, in those playoff games, 4-4, 2.35 goals against average, 9.21 save percentage, 2 shutouts, and 9 playoff games and 8 starts. And remember, Schmid only has 24 games of regular season experience, so he can be a Rookie of the Year candidate if he takes on a bigger role this year. I almost expect this to be a 1A, 1B situation, and we'll see how the Devils do in 2023. They have a lot of expectations to live up to from last year. They are a top 10 favorite to win the Stanley Cup, but They're going to, that second year is always the hardest. Can you keep your consistency from the second year? If you want to look at it in baseball, it's almost like a Baltimore Orioles situation. There was a legacy of losing for the last like 5 or 6 years of that organization, and they just got back up to elite status this year. Let's see if they can continue. By the way, 2 Hughes, no waiting. Let's see what Luke Hughes can do on this team this year, as he is going to probably get a lot more playing time this year, and he could be ready to surprise. With the University of Michigan, 87 points in 2 seasons of 80 games. So I'm very interested to see what all 3 locals do this year. I expect them to be all in contention for a playoff spot, and I think might come down to the Islanders and Rangers for a spot if the Hurricanes and the Devils continue the consistency that they had last year. They were by far the 2 best teams in that division. All right, enough talking. Let's go to one final segment, and we're going to finish the 4 major sports by talking about the NBA. Preseason is just started, actually, starts today. Finally, though, biggest NBA offseason story and soap opera has been answered. Will Damian Lillard get out of Portland, leaving the Blazers, and will he go to his preferred destination of Miami? And if you said yes to both of those things, I'm going to give you half credit as the teacher, not full credit, because Lillard was traded, but he went into the Milwaukee Bucks in a blockbuster deal involving 3 teams. Lillard goes to Milwaukee. Portland gets a pretty decent haul, including center DeAndre Ayton, Jrue Holiday, 1 other player, and 3 draft picks and swaps from 2028 to 2030. Yeah, I'm not going to get into the stats of it. I'm just mentioned that. Phoenix got Yusuf Nurkic, Grayson Allen, Keon Johnson, and Nasir Little. And if you care, stop lying. Stop lying. Oh, and then Portland last Sunday knew that Holiday wouldn't fit into the rebuilding plans, so he went to Boston for the combo of Robert Williams, Malcolm Brogdon, and 2 picks, and all the Heat got was emo Jimmy Butler. Anthony, make sense of this on the Portland side.
It's a 2. We got for 2. It's kind of a 2-tier thing for Portland. I mean, first off, it's pretty obvious Damian Lillard was not going to be in their plans long term. You already had drafted for Scoot Henderson. You had Shaedon Sharpe there. You had Anthony Simmons already. You pretty much had a young team who was heading in that direction anyway. So holding on to Damian Lillard for as long as they did, I think it should be applauded because they didn't jump on the very first offer that was thrown their way. I mean, there was plenty of talk that Damian Lillard wanted to go to Miami, and he was only playing for the Miami Heat. Well, you have to remind people that just because a player demands a trade and gives you a list of places they want to go, you as a team, as an organization, are not obligated to fulfill those wishes. At the end of the day, it's a business, and you still have to do what's best for your team. And Portland held out long enough and got a pretty good haul. They got draft picks, obviously. They got a big in DeAndre, a really good big when he wants to be, and DeAndre Ayton. And now you look at the second tier of that trade, moving Jrue Holiday to Boston, and you get back the Time God, who is also another good defensive player.
Time Lord, baby. Time Lord.
Here's the Time God to me, the Time Lord. He be whatever the hell he wants.
There's only one Time Lord, and it's nobody in the NBA.
If he plays the way he played in the if he plays the way he played 2 years ago, and Boston's runs the NBA Finals, he call himself whatever the hell he wants, okay? And Portland would take that gladly. But here's the thing too, with the Trailblazers, the draft picks, and that was really the key thing that they wanted to get back. I think one of them was unprotected as well down the line. And clearly with Portland, this is a rebuild. They wanted to tear it down. They wanted to move forward, and they waited and held out long enough for the best possible trade scenario. They get Malcolm Brogdon back too, who's actually a pretty good point guard, and a guy who fits a little more as far as being somewhat of a mentor, because he's not he over demanding personality, but at the same time, he does have a contract that can be moved as well if things don't work
It will
out
be.
down
I
the
think it
line.
will be moved in the trade deadline.
So overall, for the Portland Trail Blazers, this is as good as a trade as you was going to get. Then trading Damian Lillard to Miami and getting back a guy and maybe Tyler Hero that may not fit overall because he's a shoot first guy who needs the ball, maybe doesn't play off with the pieces you have, or just maybe just like pacifying Damian Lillard. Look, he's done a lot for the Portland organization. He's done a lot of things in the community. He's been there a long time, but this is a business, and I have to tell people just because someone has been there long enough and they demand a trade and give you a list of demands, you're not obligated to have to meet those demands just to under contract. And the Portland Trailblazers played that card. They waited for the best deal. Almost a week and a half before camp began, they knew they couldn't bring Damian Lillard into camp and that be a distraction. But they got the best deal, and it was a 2-tier deal at that. They got the draft picks they wanted. They got 2 bigs that should help out. They got the young core already in place. And more importantly, they got a haul of draft picks that can help this team rebuild down the line.
They got a lot of players, though, and I think that's the most important thing, and that's something Miami couldn't give them. Jay, jump into the TARDIS and talk about how this starts Milwaukee's next chapter, copyright KD 2007.
Yeah, if I was Doctor Who, and I would be tempted to jump ahead in time and to, let's say, June and see how this actually played out. But unfortunately, like us mere mortals, I'm going to have to take the long way around. In Lillard, the Bucks are getting a player who earned all NBA third team honors in 2023, 7th time he's made one of the 3 all NBA teams. And during his time in Portland, he was the 2013 NBA Rookie of the Year, 6-time NBA All-Star, and was named to the NBA 75th anniversary team. He instantly becomes the best player the 2-time NBA MVP Giannis Antetokounmpo has ever shared the floor with, and they immediately formed the Eastern Conference's most dangerous duo. The Bucks now have 2 of the 6 players in the association who scored at least 30 points per game last season. Lillard, in his 11th season at age 33, showed that he can still play at an elite level. 32.2 points per game, 7.3 dimes per game, and his 64.5% true shooting percentage was the best mark of his career and 11% above the NBA average. According to dunksandthrees.com, Lillard was worth 14.3 wins last season, the 6th best mark in the NBA, and a ridiculous total for a guy that only played 58 games. His 7.1 expected plus minus, a stat that basically estimates a player's contribution to his team's points per 100 possessions for an individual season, was the 3rd best EPM in the league. He increased his 3-point volume, putting up more than 11 triples per game, with more than 7 of them being pull-up threes, and making them at a 37.1% clip. Also improved his game from inside the arc. Shot 62% at the rim and half-court possessions per synergy, which was a 4% improvement over his previous career high. Increased his free throw attempts per game, getting to the charity stripe at 9.6 times per game. His previous high, 7.4 per game. He was also one of the association's most lethal players in isolation possessions last year, averaging 1.175 points per possession, according to Synergy. Ranked him as the 3rd most efficient player among those with at least 100 ISO possessions. And while it's highly unlikely that either Dame or Giannis will average 30 points per game while sharing the floor and the ball, their games and skill sets should play well together. When Giannis has the ball, Lillard can pull defenders away from him, so Giannis can have the type of space he's thrived on against opposing defense. When Lillard has the ball, screens from Giannis will set up what could be the NBA's most prolific pick and roll attack, with 3-time All-Star Chris Middleton, who will benefit from less defensive attention, less offensive pressure, and more second side actions, and Defensive Player of the Year runner-up Brook Lopez, having both of those guys on the perimeter ready to knock down open shots, along with whomever between Pat Connaughton and Malik Beasley replaces Grayson Allen.
Connaughton, by the way, dude.
Connaughton, sorry. Always struggle pronouncing that one. Replaces the departed Grayson Allen as the Bucks starting 2 guard. With Lillard, teams will no longer be able to play off the Bucks point guard in pick and roll situations and dare him to score. Look, Drew Holiday was one of the best 2-way guards in the NBA, and there's no way the Bucks win their NBA title in 2021 without him. But even as an 18.5 points per game scorer over his 3 seasons in Milwaukee, he did not scare defenses the way Lillard does. It was a common strategy for opponents to swarm Giannis and Middleton and force Holiday to beat them as a shooter, and it worked more often than not, especially in the playoffs, where Holiday shot just 39.6% from the floor, 30.4% from beyond the arc, and only got to the line 2.5 times per game during his 3 postseason runs with the Bucks. Granted, Lillard will never be confused for being an elite defender like Holiday. Dame tends to get stuck on screens, which will be an issue with the type of drop coverages that the Bucks use with Lopez. And the Bucks will need to hide him by having him guard secondary scores. They'll having Giannis, who's one of the best help side defenders in the NBA, to help clean things up. And the fact that point guards are rarely the linchpin of an elite defense, the Bucks might be able to mitigate what they lose defensively, but it would behoove Lillard to improve on his standing as a below average defender. That said, Lillard's best defense is his offense, so his presence alone with the ball in his hands should improve a team that was 15th in the NBA in offensive rating last season. And keep this in mind, the Bucks didn't get Lillard to help them win a random Tuesday night regular season game in January. They brought in one of the most clutch players of his generation to improve their chances of winning a not so random Tuesday night playoff game in May and hopefully June. Lillard forces opponents to pick their poison. Yes, the Bucks defense suffers with Dame at the point of attack instead of Holiday, but their half-court offense, which is where most postseason possessions are played, now has the potential to be elite. The Bucks did give up a lot to get Lillard beyond just Holiday and Allen, who was a 39.9% three-point shooter on 5 3-point attempts per game in just 27.4 minutes. They also gave up control over their first-round picks in 28, 29, and 30. Now, bringing in Cameron Payne will help somewhat with the roster depth and defensive issues, but by no means does it solve them. The Bucks are hoping that some of the other role players and younger guys develop into legit rotational pieces. There's still work to be done. But at the end of the day, the Bucks are now arguably the big dog of the Eastern Conference. Giannis dropped a few hints, and subtle would not be the word to describe them, that he wanted the organization to go all in on making the roster as good as it could be in advance of his impending free agency in 2025. Not sure GM John Hurst could have done much better than pairing Dame time with the Greek Freak.
They sounded the bad signal because no one thought, I mean, there were a little like small inklings last year. I think even Lillard mentioned like a joke. It's like, I'm going to come to Milwaukee, and everyone's like, ha, ha, ha. And now it happened. So when, like I said before, when the trade happens, when the Greek Freak talks, you do something about it. And they sure did. A couple of things I want to question you on. Did you say best combo in the Eastern Conference or best duo in the league?
I didn't want to go too far ahead of myself. To me, they're the best duo. They're the most dangerous duo in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, because I still think if you want a title, Jokic and Murray have to be in that consideration.
Right. But the thing is those skill sets and the way they play are different. It's why
different.
that Giannis and Dame could be the most prolific pick and roll combination.
Absolutely, but they could also be the most dangerous conference team, the most dangerous lethal duo in all of basketball. But got to give your respects to the champs. And I want to just talk really quickly about the odds of the NBA as we go towards the end here. You're really talking. I mean, I think Milwaukee and Boston are clear 1 and 1A for me
without a doubt
in the Eastern Conference, because Holiday is a huge upgrade for Boston, the point guard position, because Marcus Smart is a leader in the clubhouse. I completely understand that
when they lost him.
Yeah, but it's how they just get back what you lost. I think you upgrade in that spot.
Oh, without a doubt.
You needed to make changes in that spot. So that's what happened, and eventually Porzingis came in that same deal. We'll talk about that. I wanted to talk about that when we get to our NBA preview show. But Holiday represents two things: a tendency to be more of a point guard, as they say in Boston, and a tendency to basically be the fourth scoring option on this team. And you're talking about a guy who could still deliver 15 to 20 a game in his sleep.
Yeah.
So he is someone, and you're someone that I know as a Sixers fan, you were clamoring for.
Oh my
hopefully
God.
to make a deal, and you've clamored for the day he got traded in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, literally, I sent you guys the article that John Hollinger of The Athletic kind of broke down the potential trades, and the one that he had that would have sent Harden to the Clippers, sent someone else to to Portland, and would have sent Holiday back to the Sixers. I was so hoping it. The ironic thing is pretty much the exact trade that happened with him with Holiday winding up in Boston is pretty much almost exactly how Hollinger laid that out. So
yeah, and I think that's going to be a very interesting thing. So I think Milwaukee and Boston are 1-1A right now. And by the way, Milwaukee is both Lopez twins. How can you beat both Lopez twins by being reunited on the same team? And I think with the West, it's Denver and Phoenix, just because of Denver and their experience and having the best player in the league.
I may argue with you with Phoenix, and
I would just say if Phoenix is healthy. I think if Phoenix is healthy.
I got 4 words for you: Chris Paul, Golden State.
Chris Paul, Golden State is nice, and we'll talk more about that.
I'm not going to get into it here.
I understand. We will get into it here. I know Chris Paul, but I think overall talent-wise, those 4 are a little step ahead of everybody else. And right now, they're going to be the consensus favorites in both the East and the West with what you see on the floor currently. That's the big thing. And we can talk more about Golden State.
But I agree with you, Rabbi, though. I think the biggest loser in the Dame trade and the other trades is Miami.
It's Miami.
Considering what they lost in the offseason and they've come away with nothing, that's big.
And they basically have to depend on a lot of people. Like they have to depend on Nikola Jovic, not Jokic, Jovic to be. They have to depend on more young guys. They basically have to depend more on the scrap heap players that they've gotten to get to where they are. And
they have taken some of those guys, and look, their player development program is the best in the NBA, bar none.
But eventually, it does fade out.
So, you never know. You never know.
We'll never know. But again,
I'll tell you this, because the guy that, and I talked about this on our NBA draft show, the guy that they picked, Jaime Jaquez, he is a prime candidate to be the next guy in that pipeline of players who get developed in the Heat culture and become really good NBA players. Not elite players, but really good NBA players.
That's what Emo Jimmy would tell us about all along. I had so many puns too, but then of course
I know, but
all that stuff had to happen. But it is late. All right, for Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, I'm Steve Rabinowitz. Thank you for taking a long, strange trip through the 4 major sports tonight. YouTube.com/On the Sports Lines on demand, Facebook.com/On the Sports Lines live. And if you're watching us live, thank you. And on X, yes, X at ONTH Sports Lines. It is what the damn platform is called. Deal with it. I want people to go.
It's like the artist formerly known as Prince. That's how I'm going to refer to it.
Well, it's the artist formerly known as Twitter.
Twitter.
Currently X. People need to watch it. All right. See you soon. We're out of here. We'll talk to you next time.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.